Alright guys, what's up? Theory and Theology. Good morning. Hopefully you're having a good morning. I think I'm off to a good start. Made a bulletproof coffee with a little bit of Vitashroom mix in there. The only thing about that mix is that it kind of settles at the bottom pretty quickly, so I'll be drinking the coffee and then next thing I know it's kind of like at the bottom, so I don't really know if I'm getting the full benefits of it. It has cacao, it has B vitamins, it has lion's mane, mushroom. It kind of tastes like a light cinnamon cocoa almost. Not like as rich, it just tastes like a really light version. Like you don't have to use a lot of water with it, but the more water you use, if you just drink it alone, it's pretty, it tastes maybe watered down a little bit, but, I put it in coffee, and that's kind of a good mix, but, I don't know, I'm not trying to get, like, way too hyped up today, but I want the energy to be behind everything today, so it might be a 2 coffee day. I don't really know. I'm still settling in. Lately, I've been studying about the Bible. Surprise, surprise. But I guess on a more specific topic, I've been looking at topics surrounding Marcion. And I can't even remember if I recorded an episode about him before. I don't know his exact history, but I'm learning from some of the lectures and blog posts by David Litwa. And I started studying this around maybe Easter, I don't really remember, honestly. But with Tovia Singer, Tovia Singer, it kind of took me down a rabbit hole. So I'm going to read a comment that I left on a blog post, if I can find it. Let me see if I can find it. Okay. So let me first read... I'm first going to read a message that I sent to one of my friends. It was a screenshot of one of David Litwa's blog posts. I'm just going to read a little bit of what he wrote. He wrote, "The church claims that Marcion's ecclesial network became the largest Christian denomination until the Emperor Constantine issued a damnatio memoriae, meaning a purge from memory, in 332 CE, intended to erase all history of the very first Bible." And basically it says, it further asserts that the counter Bible, which was written, later on, it says, ratified in a council at Rome in 382 CE, that counter Bible to this very first Bible that was Marcion's first Bible, basically combined 27 New Testament books with the Old Testament. And as we know, when we read the Old Testament and the New Testament, I guess my questions started coming up more when I was reading some of the New Testament where they were quoting the Old Testament, and I was like, okay, so let's go look that up. And then you go look it up, and sometimes it's not even like the same thing. And so that was usually a little weird. Like, so I kind of responded or commented on M. David Litwa's blog post. And okay, so I wrote, and this isn't like worded very fabulously, but I wrote, amazing stuff. I'm new to this topic. I went down a rabbit hole listening to Tovia Singer. I began wondering about Bible history. The first thing that caught my attention, which my theology major friends and pastor friends never answered, was why are so many quotes in the New Testament, so that's grammatically incorrect, but basically why are they different from the Old Testament? And then in studying more history, I got stuck at the Council of Nicaea and all those other later councils, and so I did record a podcast episode about that a while back, talking about the Council of Nicaea and all these other councils, which was basically all these councils that, were kind of combining everything together to try and make like one solid Christian belief system, because there were multiple systems before Orthodoxy and before the Catholic Church. But that's where I was kind of like, okay, because looking at the timeline, I was always kind of like, okay, like if these things are happening in the year 300 or whatever, what was happening for like 300 years in Christianity? That would be almost like if a religion sprung up in like the 1700s, and then today in 2024 they finally have like a scripture, and there's all these people that have been writing and all these different things that have been happening in different groups of worshipers, and then all of a sudden in 2024, 1700s, what was even happening in the freaking 1700s? Like, this is like horse and buggy and like slavery days. Like, this is so long ago. Like, when you think of how long like 300 plus years is, it's like it's like a whole different world. Like, if you think of like people were practicing something in the like that would be like today if there was something that sprung up in the 1700s that people were worshiping and practicing and different groups sprouting out, and then all of a sudden, like people were writing, letters and scriptures and accounts of their experiences, and then all of a sudden, one political leader in 2024, Biden or somebody, or Netanyahu or somebody, is like, okay, like, some politician is like, let's make this an official religious thing, and start writing a book and choose what's going to go in there, and choose which beliefs we're going to keep as part of this religion and which ones are not, and having multiple councils of all these groups, and then finding out that the councils of all these people who get involved, these bishops, and I don't know if they're philosophers or whoever it is, but all these religious leaders, they get kind of manipulated. Like, okay, if you want to be part of the council, you gotta, you get some kind of special favor to be in the council. But if you don't want to be in the council, we're gonna take your money, we're gonna take your land, we're gonna basically manipulate you to the point that you have to agree with what the council agrees with, because if you disagree and you're part of this council, then you're going to get reprimanded pretty heavily, taxed or whatever it means, maybe killed, banished. You can't live. I think it was like you couldn't live in the Roman territories anymore. And it's like, that would be like someone saying you can't live in any American territory if you were part of this council and you don't agree with what Biden decides is going to be part of this religion. And you're like, your whole career, your whole life's work has gone to being a clergy person or a political person or a person in power. And so there's all that manipulation behind it too, which, I don't even know what to do with these types of pieces of history. But yeah, I got stuck at the Council of Nicaea and all those other later councils. I'm reading more. Of what I understood, I interpreted it to mean that early followers of Jesus were believing and worshiping differently than Orthodox and Catholic groups, because these were the groups that were forming all of these ideas. They were solidifying things like, what's the day of Easter, and what's the, are we going to say there's a Trinity, or are we going to say that Jesus is divine? Like, these weren't all solidified like they are now. Like, and this is happening like hundreds of years like after Jesus was even on earth. And so that's confusing. The questions always led to more questions. I love it. This puzzle of life. So far, anything regarding Marcion is brand new for me, and this is exactly the content I've been looking for. I'm wondering if this history is well known among theologians. It sounds as if they try and hide it. Most professional fields learn their origins. I've noticed that large gap between Jesus being on earth and then some of the first writings by Paul, and then the denominations and Bible were formed hundreds of years later. Finally, something to fill in some of those gaps. So yeah, basically what I was trying to say is, the first books of the Bible weren't even written right away. I think they were like 40 to 70 years after Jesus. And they weren't even, I don't know. And basically his comment was, mainstream Christians definitely ignore or hide what they don't like or know. And that creates a problem, because it's like, I'm wondering, do theologians or all these people, like I told you guys, I was raised in Adventism. I knew plenty of people that were theology majors who went to school to become pastors, or double majored in theology and studied theology, or took classes in Greek and different religion and philosophical religious courses and stuff. Were they ever taught about Marcion's Bible? Were they ever taught about, things that happened before Orthodox and Catholic Church? Because I'm pretty sure they were taught that. Like, I come from the field of psychology, and they don't just like leave stuff out and just like start like with Freud or whatever. Like, it starts even before that. Like, you go through the origins of, what was happening, how were people being treated for, and even within anthropology and stuff, like in different cultures, how did people treat the mind, the body, the soul, like the combination of it all as one person. Like, how do you get treated? And how did treatment look? And we all know that it did take a turn for the worse, where people were being kind of like just chained up and stuff. And then, there were more humane methods. Then there were all these other weird, like, manipulative methods, but some of it did work somewhat. And now we're kind of in a day and age where, at least on the West Coast, there's a lot more Eastern thought tied into things. and the insurance kind of messes with things, and there's kind of this weird medical model and these kind of like there's like this necessity with diagnostics with like certain insurance branches just so you can actually treat a person. And that wasn't something that was happening in early history of the field. But there is less stigma nowadays, I'd say, at least in the modern US kind of major cities and stuff. Like since the pandemic, the field of psychology like has become more more people are needing the help and gravitating towards it. You see apps and commercials and different like ads, and it's everywhere. Like people are talking way more about health, almost to a point where it's like becoming part of language, where it's like people are talking about triggers and toxicity and all kinds of stuff that's like, do you really know what you're saying? And it's almost becoming like part of like common language. And people are kind of like almost overly doing it to some in some ways. But I don't know. I kind of doubt that in the field of learning about religion, the history of Christianity, I kind of doubt that they don't learn about Marcion, or that they don't learn about another Bible that was written, and the whole manipulation of how the Bible that we have today is. I'm just curious about what people are taught in school and why pastors don't teach these things, because it's like, I kind of know that, I know that they learn a lot of stuff that they don't teach, because, I already saw it when I was like in a church where I was kind of like, okay, I'm in a church that keeps the Sabbath, and we say, Adventists, just like every other church says, that they're the church that's more accurate than any other church. Every church is going to say that. No church is going to be like, oh, we're not accurate. They're always going to say we're more accurate because we do this and these other people don't do that, or because we don't do this and other people do that. So the Sunday worship thing is not a part of Adventism. The Jewish Sabbath worship, day of worship, is a part of Adventism. But then there's all these other holidays that in the Bible it says keep my Sabbaths, and it has all these other feast days that the Catholic Church has their own feast days. I was just reading that David Litwa article where it says Marcion's feast day is July 15th. And on June 8th of 2023, Marcion was officially classified as a saint, which was just last year. And he's the one who published the first Christian Bible in Rome in 144 CE, or AD, or whatever you want to call the year. 144. So 144. And then in 382, that's when the Catholic Bible, the counter Bible, comes out. The Bible that we use, which has been changed since then, because I know they took out the fourth commandment. The Adventist Church taught me about that, and I know they've changed some things about purgatory and hell and all kinds of stuff. Like, I don't know if that's in the Bible, but I know they've changed the Bible since 382 CE. But 382 CE versus 144 CE, that's a big jump in years. And basically starting that purge in memory, it took like 50 years for them to kind of get it. They were basically, persecuting the people of like Marcion's religion, and all these other people were getting persecuted, who believed in these other churches, and they basically made it so that Orthodox and Catholicism had to become the main thing, because they kind of manipulated and like punished people into being that. And so that's not a good look, you know. That's not a good look. But of course that's hidden. There is that manipulation of like, okay, like who decided all this? Because most people I'd say know about the Apocrypha, right? That it exists. Most Protestant Bibles don't have the Apocrypha. Most Catholic Bibles do, I think. But I always heard of it, and I always thought, oh, it just the name itself sounds like something so strange and I don't want to say evil, but almost. Like, I never knew what it meant. I was like, what does this word mean? You know, it sounds like some end of the world kind of topic. Like, I don't think that's what it means at all. But I mean, just the way the word sounds, it just sounds so weird. And I was always kind of taught, that's not really for you, kind of thing. And in college, I was taking this history of the Bible class with this new Revised Standard Version study Bible that had like historical notes. So it wasn't like religious commentary, it was historical and like archaeological commentary, and it had the Apocrypha in there. And that's the first time I ever read any of the Apocrypha, and I was like, oh, there's a lot of overlap with a lot of some of the stories are different and stuff, but you know, there's a lot of overlap with like mainstream other Bible. And you know, I kind of just left it alone. And me and this friend kind of constantly run things by each other. We're like, what? Like, we find out new stuff and we're like, what is going on? But that's one of the things, is like, who decides what's in the Bible? Who decides what the Bible is? That's a little bit concerning. And then when Tovia Singer in his videos was talking about when Tovia Singer was like talks about the discrepancies of especially some of Paul's quotes of the Old Testament, and how they're just not even the same quotes. Or even when he's reading from like Jeremiah or Isaiah or something, he has to mention, okay, the Christian Bible, these are the verses, but in the Jewish Bible, these are the verses. And it's kind of like they're like staggered a little bit off because there's maybe a little missing or a little extra, depending which one you're reading. So there's definitely been some kind of manipulation, even if you're someone like me who is just like, you know, just barely scratching the surface of something. It's like you can see that there's some kind of manipulation going on. Somebody's not fully giving the whole story. I'm not bitter about it. It's just like, it's noticeable. Like when you start looking and just like opening your eyes to stuff, it's kind of like, okay, what's going on? You know, like, why is it like this? Why aren't we being taught this? Why is it so like hush hush in the dark? You know, because the more you study something and read it, you start noticing things that don't make sense sometimes. Like, it just doesn't add up. Now, my introduction to this content came from I really don't remember. I mean, it's a long story. I might talk about that a different time. But in general, I would say you know, I don't know if I would be considered like a skeptic type of person. Like, not in like the actual definition of the word. Like how people identify themselves as skeptics. Like I do kind of like the Bible for what it is. I was kind of one of those people who was taught, to have faith. And I feel like there's only so much, a person can really do with what they're given, But it's kind of like when you ask the people, when you ask the masters, people who have their master's degrees, their doctorate degrees, people who have been pastoring for, I guess the pastor that my family knows the best, he's been pastoring for like over 40, he just hit his 40-year anniversary. And I hit a point in time learning from that church early on where I just wasn't learning anything anymore, to be honest. I would go and I would be there, but because I studied on my own and because we had this Friday night thing where we would kind of like, the youth pastor would, or collegiate pastor, whatever age range we were, depending, he would kind of play the devil's advocate, and like he'd take a story and like pretend like he didn't believe it, and you'd basically have to not argue your point, but kind of like, use other Bible texts and things to kind of like back up what you're saying, or some other kind of faith tradition. So he'd be like something, for example, like God is evil because he sent the flood and wiped out all the people during the time of Noah. And then you could basically that could be the topic of discussion, so it's like, the story of Noah, how that goes, and you'd have to study it and kind of talk. There's kind of like this back and forth, and I loved it because I was like, it was thought-provoking. A lot of people I knew hated it because they didn't like the argumentative kind of style. Like, I don't think it ever got too intense. I never took it that way. He always had a smile on his face, and like, you knew where he stood. Like, he believed in things, but that was kind of his, like, he liked to get the gears turning. And some people just wanted to hear like a sermon, just give me the information. I don't really want to like talk back or like discuss it. And that's fine, everybody has their own style of preferred learning and their own style of doing things. Sorry guys, I'm hydrating and drinking coffee at the same time, so it's a little bit of pausing here. But I did find, there is a copy of it's called The Very First Bible. You can find a copy of it online. There's some chapters on YouTube that are audio. I know there's chapter 3 and 4. And reading through it, I'm not done. I think I'm on chapter 5 of the Gospel of Jesus. There are other books like Philemon, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, Philippians. I think there's a chapter, there's a book called the Laodiceans or something like that. I know that's not in the New Testament. And the Gospel of Jesus Christ, or the Gospel of Jesus, is not in the New Testament either. And those other ones are Paul's writings. The Laodicea one, at least that's not what it's labeled. If there is one in the New Testament, there's nothing labeled that in the New Testament. I would say so far, the book is, there's a lot of familiarity to it. Now, I've mentioned this before, that I grew up studying the Bible, but I have not been like super diligent in studying. It kind of comes in waves for me. Like, I get bored of watching just like regular content. Like, I don't have all that many interests in too many topics. Like, I love topics surrounding music, music theory, just listening to music in general, bands, interviews with different bands and musicians and stuff, tutorials on how to use, like, you know, computer software for music. I like tech topics like digital marketing and SEO and, you know, web design and monetization and all that kind of stuff. Small business, copywriting, like little like video editing agencies and stuff like that. I like those types of topics. And I like comedy. I like stand-up. So I do watch like Kill Tony episodes. I watch, you know, music videos. I watch, you know, I like finance. So I watch a lot of like Caleb Hammer, Dave Ramsey, stuff like that. And that's, for the most part, that's almost all I watch outside of like culture and religious related content. And like you guys know, the culture and religious related stuff isn't always Christian related. It just always circles back to that because that's where my background is. So I do like to build on it more. So this is more building that I've been doing. And this year I've been trying to attempt a little bit more at like trying to practice stuff. Even, I'm not saying I practice it because I have a deep belief in it or because I'm like, oh, this is the right way, everything else is wrong. But just to see, you know, see what's out there. Like, oh, other people are fasting, other people are praying, other people are, you know, avoiding this type of food, or other people are doing this or doing that, you know. Let me try it while those people are trying it and see, like, what's the experience like. You know, I'm kind of more into that a little bit lately. It kind of keeps me a little connected with the times of year, and you know, I'm not really like going to churches or doing anything like that, so it kind of keeps me at least doing something a little on the active side that I can make content about it a little bit, but I'm not doing it for the content necessarily. Like, if I continue doing any of those things or plan to like adapt it into my life or anything, I'm probably not going to talk about it. I just, the initial experiences, I'm comfortable talking about like, oh, this is different and why. But past that, like, I don't really want to talk about it. I feel like anything that I'm going to be practicing on my own, I'd just rather keep it to myself, or anything I'm not going to be practicing, I'd rather keep that to myself. But as far as the studying stuff, I can talk about that because I feel like that's something that's like, you know, I'm studying because that's what I do. I study. You know, it's something that is beneficial to me to study and learn, and to try to talk about it for other people who have interest. And my goal isn't really to like sway people or to be like, oh, like I'm right and they're wrong, or like look how more right I am because I learned this thing now. And like, who knows, I might be learning completely false information. Like, what do I know? You know, like I have limited time to study this stuff, even more limited time because I'm now working a 40-hour work week and trying to work out and stuff too. And so I have like limited time. But this stuff to me sometimes is just going to be a little bit more interesting than, you know, watching stand-up comedy all night, or watching music videos, or learning different software. It's like, I like something with more depth to it. But history is so complicated because there are so many lies in history. There's so much manipulation. I mean, anyone who comes from like an indigenous culture knows, I mean, everyone does, but anyone who has like a connection with an indigenous culture, you kind of know how history treats different cultures. And it's like, if you're not like a mainstream culture who's kind of like at the top making the decisions in that society, you're usually not going to be having a history or an experience that's very equal. It's kind of just how it goes, unfortunately. I don't think humans have figured out how to really live without manipulating and killing and, you know, the greed over others and trying to overtake with power and money and all that kind of stuff. I don't think all humans have figured that out. I feel like there are a lot of groups that don't really focus on that, but then there are other groups in society that, I don't know what it is with the Western world. It's not only the Western world, but throughout history, it's mostly been the Western world from what I know. But it's everywhere. Like, I don't want to just be like, it's only these people. Like, if you look at any history, a lot of it is war. And manipulation of war and propaganda about why we're backing this war and backing these people and the lies surrounding it. It's like everybody just wants to kill because of whatever reason that they see behind it, even if it's a religious reason or some kind of material gain, power, whatever it is, you know. I mean, I'm not really here to talk about all that, but it all kind of boils down. But I think, I guess the last thing I'll make a point at is it's called the very first Bible. The one that I'm reading, it has the free version that's online written, has some typos. I kind of went through a loop where I was like trying to click the free download and it doesn't really get you there. You have to basically click on the little the three lines, and then it gives you this pull down menu, and then from there you can kind of read the menu. I'll try and find the link and post it, and then you can read it. But it does have typos. It's written kind of weird. Like, it's very familiar. It's a whole lot of Jesus. There's a part that almost seemed like the Beatitudes, but it wasn't fully that. It was something else, because I don't think it said like blessed are the meek and that kind of stuff. It was kind of like blessed are a couple of these different types of people, but then like to the people who are wealthy and the people who are, you know, it was kind of like against like the other people with power. There are some parts that are a little bit different. Like the guy who was lowered through the roof, it says couch instead of mat. To me, those are two different things. I mean, there's like little differences, and just the way things are worded makes it even more strange to try to like read and be like, oh, like what are they saying there? But it's a pretty it's pretty equivalent. Like, there's a lot of overlap. It's not like, so far it's not so different that it's like, oh, look, you know, they said this and that's like so wrong, you know, or this is so right or more wrong. Like, there's nothing that stands out that's like so different. But there's definitely a lot of talking about Jesus talking, Jesus praying, Jesus. It pretty much reads like the Gospels. No birth story. It just kind of starts talking about during a certain year of reign of some leader. But I gotta get on. It's 8:05. I gotta log on to work at 8:30, and I still gotta eat breakfast. So, yeah, I'll post the links to what I've been listening to and what I've been reading. And again, I'm not saying that this is right or this is wrong. I'm just saying this is what I'm reading. This is what I'm studying lately, at least for now, until I either lose interest in studying it or until, you know, who knows. But, all right, that's it for now, guys.